Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're embarking on, well, a really extraordinarily deep dive. It's a narrative that truly embodies that spirit of forging something huge from, well, seemingly nothing. When you think about India's standing as a global IT powerhouse today, packed with innovative tech giants, a vibrant hub, it's almost hard to really grasp how that transformation actually, it often feels like it just appeared overnight, right? But as we're about to discover, it was anything but. Our guide for this journey is The Maverick Effect by Harish Mehta. It's a book that promises to unveil the gripping, untold story of India's digital awakening. And this isn't some dry history lesson. No, it's a deeply personal account, a living testament, really, to what just a handful of relentlessly determined individuals can achieve against, frankly, staggering odds, odds that seemed insurmountable. And Mehta wasn't just watching from the sidelines, he was a key architect, deeply involved. So our mission for this deep dive is pretty clear. We're going to extract the most critical insights, sometimes maybe counterintuitive insights, from Mehta's firsthand story. We want to understand not just what happened, but crucially, how. How did a few visionary people manage to change the entire path of a nation? We'll unpack the huge challenges they faced, the surprising breakthroughs they somehow engineered, and, maybe most importantly, the enduring lessons for anyone out there looking to build something revolutionary from the ground up.
What's truly fascinating here, maybe the first aha moment for anyone looking at this story, is just how profoundly unlikely this whole success narrative was.
Yeah.
I mean, if you could rewind to India in the 1980s, long before it got that title IT superpower, you'd find a country grappling with immense systemic challenges. We're talking deep-seated poverty, pervasive unemployment, and a stifling, almost, labyrinthine bureaucracy. It often seemed designed to actually stop progress, not help it. The very idea of India leading the world in something cutting edge like technology, it seemed not just improbable, but frankly absurd to most people looking from the outside.
Yeah.
And even within India itself, there was just widespread skepticism, a fundamental misunderstanding about computers and what they could actually do. A lot of people genuinely feared them, saw them purely as job-destroying machines.
Right. That fear factor is huge.
Absolutely. And this deep dive offers such a unique viewpoint because, like you said, it's told by Harish Mehta. He's not just some historian looking back at documents. He's a visionary, a real trailblazer, and genuinely one of the very few people back then who had the foresight to see this huge untapped potential in Indian software when pretty much no one else did. He didn't just watch it happen, he lived it. He breathed every struggle, every tiny victory, working tirelessly, often totally behind the scenes to make it real. His direct involvement gives the whole story this unparalleled authenticity, an insider's view you just rarely get.
That perspective is invaluable.
Totally. So as we get into this, hold on to this core idea. And this isn't just about technology. It's not just bits and bytes. It's a gripping story of, well, audacious vision, sheer stubborn perseverance, and incredible transformative power of people working together, collective action, especially when facing overwhelming odds. The lessons here go way beyond the tech industry. They offer profound insights into what it really means to build something new, to unite different forces, and to fundamentally shift a nation's direction against all logical bets. It's really about creating a future that, at first, only exists in the minds of a very small group of people.
Okay, let's really dig into this. When we look at the incredible tech scene in India today, cities like Bengaluru, Hyderabad, just buzzing with innovation, startups everywhere, global tech giants, it's genuinely hard to fully grasp that not so long ago, the country had virtually no IT industry. Not just small, but practically non-existent. So from Mehta's perspective in the book, what was the actual landscape like for tech and innovation back then, say the 1980s? What were some of the biggest, maybe even the most surprising hurdles these architects of the revolution had to deal with?
Yeah, Mehta's account paints a really vivid, almost stark picture of 1980s India. It was a landscape of extreme scarcity and deep-seated resistance when it came to technology. Let's start with that huge challenge: technological ignorance and fear. Computers weren't just rare. They were often seen with real suspicion, sometimes outright hostility, by the public, sure, but also crucially by the government. There's this deeply ingrained, almost gut-level feeling that automating tasks with computers would inevitably lead to massive job losses. And that was truly terrifying, a country already struggling with high unemployment.
Understandable fear, in a way.
Absolutely. So this wasn't just about lack of access or technical know-how. It was a fundamental cultural and political resistance to technological advancement itself. Machinery was often seen as this existential threat to human labor, not as an opportunity for creating new things or growth. Mehta talks about how debates raged, Not just about the economics of it, but about the very nature of work, the dignity of manual labor, and how these foreign machines might disrupt the social fabric.
Wow. So it wasn't just practical resistance, it was philosophical too.
Exactly. Imagine trying to introduce software development in that kind of climate. It was an almost impossible uphill battle just to get people to consider the potential benefits. The word computer itself often brought up images of job cuts and societal chaos.
Okay, so that's a massive cultural hurdle. What else?
Well, building on that, the second colossal hurdle was the absolute lack of infrastructure and policy. Trying to build a whole new industry needs a supportive framework, right? India just didn't have one at all. There were no coherent government policies designed to nurture or even really acknowledge this budding IT sector. Things like venture capital funds, government grants for tech startups, completely non-existent. So consequently, there was no ecosystem, no mentors, no easy access to talent focused on software, no clear rules or pathways.
A total vacuum.
A profound vacuum, yeah, where any new innovation just struggled incredibly hard to take root, often just suffocated by bureaucratic red tape. The lack of government support, or even just a basic understanding of what IT was or could be, meant these early entrepreneurs were operating completely in the dark. No clear guidelines, zero tax incentive to encourage growth, no regulatory framework that actually helped business. Mehta describes the sheer absurdity of trying to import just one computer. It could take months, even years, because of complex customs rules and import duties that could literally double the cost.
Double the cost,
Yeah.
just for one machine.
You got it. And reliable internet. Forget about it. That was a distant dream if anyone even thought about it then. Think about how modern tech hubs thrive today. Supportive government, easy capital, clear rules. India back then had none of that. Zero. It was truly starting from, well, below zero in terms of systemic support. These guys had to literally invent the path as they went along.
Inventing the path. That sounds exhausting. And there was a third challenge.
Yes, and this one's particularly poignant, I think. It was the untapped talent and the global perception of India. Indian engineers, even with all these disadvantages, the lack of infrastructure, they were undeniably brilliant, highly skilled, really bright, many educated at top institutions within India. But they lacked direction. They lacked a collective voice, a unified platform to channel their huge potential within their own country and globally. If the world even noticed India in the tech sphere at all, it mostly just saw it as a source of cheap manual labor for basic repetitive tasks.
Right, the cheap labor stereotype.
Exactly. Definitely not as a hub for sophisticated talent or innovation. And this was a critical misperception that just had to be shattered for India to move forward. The raw potential was there, no doubt, but it was disorganized, fragmented, totally unable to project a unified, confident image or exert any real influence globally. Mehta really details this palpable sense of frustration among these talented people. They just couldn't find meaningful outlets for their skills in their own country.
So that led to brain drain, I imagine.
Precisely. Many sought opportunities abroad, which just made the problem worse back home. A fragmented, undervalued industry losing its best minds. It was a vicious cycle that needed a radical break.
Okay, so given that situation you've laid out, the fear, the lack of policy, the global dismissal, it sounds almost hopeless. How on earth did anything start to change? Was there a spark, a moment, maybe a conversation, or some small win that made these pioneers think, okay, maybe we're not completely crazy? The book talks about the birth of Nasscom. Not some government thing, but something really organic from the ground up. So who are these people and what was this audacious, almost fantastical idea they had?
You've absolutely nailed the pivot point. This is where the sheer power of individual vision and collective will really comes into play. This is the Maverick mindset in action. Nasscom, the National Association of Software and Service Companies, wasn't created by some government committee, not at all. It was born in the most unassuming, almost you could say clandestine settings, not big formal boardrooms. Think small, maybe smoky meeting rooms, quick conversations crammed into shared taxis between flights, countless late-night phone calls across different cities and time zones.
Grassroots, literally.
Yeah, totally grassroots. It came about through the relentless, almost obsessive efforts of Harish Mehta himself and a handful of other extraordinary, like-minded visionaries, people like F.C. Kohli from TCS, Nandan Nilekani from Infosys, names we know well now. Mehta wasn't just a founder, he was critically important as its first elected chairman, and he took that role incredibly seriously. His core philosophy, which was pretty radical back then, was collaboration over competition.
In business, that's unusual.
Highly unusual. He just instinctively knew that this tiny new industry, fighting for its very survival, couldn't afford internal rivalries. They couldn't afford to be fragmented. They had to present a united front.
The book mentions Mehta worked for years without taking a salary, dedicating himself completely to building this foundation, this ecosystem. That shows an incredible level of personal commitment, self-sacrifice really, the mark of a true nation builder who sees something bigger than just personal profit. He believed so strongly in India's potential, its youth, its brain power. He famously said, "We were not here to compete. We were here to build together."
Build together. That's powerful. So how did they get competitors on board with that?
That was one of Nasscom's first and maybe most critical achievements, uniting rival founders. Honestly, it seems almost impossible when you think about it, getting these fiercely competitive people who are basically fighting each other for scraps in a tiny, almost non-existent market to put aside their business rivalries, their secrets, and unite under one single mission.
How did he manage that?
Mehta's genius was in articulating a shared threat, the threat of the whole industry just vanishing, and a collective, much bigger vision that went beyond any one company's interests. The book really emphasizes how the idea of the collective good had to win over individual gain in those early, fragile stages. It speaks volumes about the persuasive power of a truly shared vision, especially when presented by compelling, ethical leaders like Mehta. He'd argue basically, if one of us fails, we all fail. If we stand together, we all rise. That took immense trust building, constant lobbying, constant reminding them of the bigger picture, the existential threats they all face together.
A masterclass in negotiation, it sounds like.
Definitely. And it's a huge lesson for any field-facing foundational challenges. Unity and collective action are paramount, even between rivals.
Okay, so they united the rivals. What was the next big strategic move?
Having brought these, disparate but brilliant minds together, their next vital step was building the first IT lobby body in India. They created Nasscom specifically as this dedicated platform to talk directly, coherently, and with one voice to the government. This was absolutely crucial for pushing for policy changes, for breaking down those bureaucratic walls, and maybe even more importantly, for just gaining legitimacy, gaining respect in the eyes of a skeptical, often resistant government.
Right, tackling that no policies problem head on.
Exactly. It was a deeply strategic move. By forming this unified front, they could clearly articulate what the industry needed, address the government's skepticism directly, and shift from being seen as misunderstood, maybe even feared, to being recognized as a legitimate, valuable part of the nation's economic future. Mehta's book talks about countless sleepless nights spent meticulously writing detailed policy papers, not just saying we need this, but explaining why it mattered for India's future.
Real homework.
Absolutely rigorous, painstaking intellectual work, laying the fundamental legal and regulatory groundwork just to allow the industry to exist, let alone grow. They were essentially writing the rule book as they went along.
In all this, you mentioned Mehta work without pay. Where did the resources come from?
That's perhaps the most inspiring part. It was all achieved with what Mehta famously calls zero resources, maximum intent. Nasscom started with virtually no money, no initial government funding, no big corporate backing, nothing. But what it did have was an abundance of intent, this almost unshakable determination, and a singular audacious focus, put India on the global tech map.
Zero resources, maximum intent. I like that.
It perfectly captures that raw entrepreneurial spirit of the early days. It really emphasizes that powerful truth, that vision and commitment can often make up for a serious lack of traditional resources, especially when you're building something entirely new, like an ecosystem. It wasn't about fancy offices or big budgets. It was about sheer willpower, brain power, and this profound shared belief in a future few others could even imagine. This was the bedrock of India's IT revolution, a testament to what you can achieve through collective will and that collaborative spirit. It shows that sometimes the biggest changes don't come from existing wealth or power, but from purpose and drive.
So Nasscom is born. Against all odds, fueled by vision, this maverick spirit, uniting rivals, working with basically nothing, an incredible start. But vision needs action, right? Once this unlikely alliance was formed, what did they actually do? What were the immediate tangible steps? I mean, it couldn't have been smooth sailing from there. What were Nasscom's real functions on the ground? And what kind of battles were they fighting behind the scenes, away from the spotlight?
You're absolutely right. It wasn't smooth, and Nasscom's role was incredibly broad, demanding just a staggering amount of effort. Firstly, they were crucial in structuring and professionalizing the sector. Think about it. This was essentially an unregulated, sometimes chaotic space for software back then. Nasscom brought much-needed structure, it fostered trust between these new companies, and really importantly, it established a framework for ethical conduct.
Building credibility.
Exactly. This was vital for the credibility of this new software sector.
both inside India, where skepticism was still high, and maybe even more importantly, internationally. Indian companies were often viewed with suspicion or just ignored entirely. So, by setting up a code of conduct, defining best practices, creating a framework for how people should interact professionally, they helped legitimize the industry for potential clients, for investors. And it also fostered this sense of shared responsibility professionalism among the members themselves. It was about building a solid reputation from square one, tuning a messy collection of entrepreneurs into a cohesive, trustworthy industry. They basically wrote the blueprint for ethical and efficient operation.
Okay, structure and ethics. What else?
Okay. Secondly, a huge chunk of their energy went into education and promotion, both at home and abroad. This was massive. They actively, tirelessly worked to educate the Indian media, the government, the general public about the immense power and potential of software. This meant directly confronting those deep-seated fears about computers destroying jobs. They ran campaigns to promote technology not as a threat, but as a massive job creator, an engine for national progress.
Changing the narrative.
Completely. And at the same time, they took on the incredibly hard task of promoting Indian IT globally, specifically fighting that pervasive cheap labor stereotype. They had to articulate India's unique value proposition, the skills, the quality, the brainpower. This was a Herculean PR and advocacy effort. Countless international roadshows, difficult meetings with skeptical foreign execs, relentless demonstrations of India's intellectual capital.
Selling India's talent to the world.
Precisely. It wasn't enough just to build the tech skills. They had to fundamentally change minds and perceptions, nationally and internationally. Imagine trying to convince a whole population, steeped in tradition, that computers are good, they create opportunities, when the story for so long was negative or suspicious. It took almost evangelical passion.
And internally, within India.
Beyond perception, they also played a truly key role in inspiring the youth and fostering industry collaboration internally. Nasscom actively worked to convince the brightest young Indians, often those with engineering or science degrees, that software development wasn't just a decent job, but it was the future of the nation.
Building the talent pipeline?
Exactly. This was critical for attracting a new, brilliant generation into this growing industry.
Oh, right.
And concurrently, they collaborated incredibly closely with the pioneering companies of the time, the now famous names. Infosys, TCS, Wipro, HCL, NIIT, in their very early, very formative days. This two-pronged approach was genius. It created a vital pipeline of fresh talent and fostered this deep sense of community and mutual support among the emerging tech companies. Nasscom acted almost like the central nervous system for the whole burgeoning industry, facilitating connections, enabling shared learning, making sure these companies weren't just working in silos, but as part of a bigger movement.
Like an incubator for the whole sector.
Very much so. They organized industry conferences, bringing competitors together for workshops, sharing knowledge, discussing policy jointly, building synergy.
But you mentioned struggles. The book doesn't gloss over those.
Not at all.
Yeah.
It's crucial to understand the unseen struggles. The book is very honest about the harsh, often just grinding realities behind the scenes. This journey was far from glamorous or easy. There was literally no consistent money to fund Nasscom's operations. Mehta talks about how they often ran on fumes, relying on personal loans, small membership fees, just the sheer goodwill and willpower of a few dedicated people.
Wow.
And they faced significant, often hostile opposition. From the entrenched government bureaucracy which hated change and saw IT as maybe a threat to its control, and from established giants in traditional industries who saw this new IT sector as a direct threat to their own monopolies or ways of doing business.
Resistance from all sides.
Pretty much. Mehta details moments of profound self-doubt, intense isolation, deep frustration among the founders. They often felt like they were pushing this massive boulder uphill against impossible odds. He describes the sheer grind of those sleepless nights, meticulously writing complex policy papers. Not for personal gain, but for the collective good of an industry they believed would change India. They faced constant, dismissive skepticism from every corner, including from people who simply didn't believe India could ever lead in tech, who just dismissed their vision as naive, completely unachievable.
That must have been incredibly demoralizing.
Immensely. That constant skepticism plus internal politics, external hurdles, it made their mission incredibly grueling. But despite all of that, what truly stands out, the core message maybe, is that the Mavericks didn't quit. Their unwavering commitment was fueled by one single overarching goal: put India on the world's tech map. This enduring dedication, this collective determination, even when things look bleakest, that's one of the most powerful lessons. It reminds us that often the biggest successes come from the longest, hardest fights.
It's truly astonishing to hear about those struggles, the lack of funds, the constant pushback, the sheer grind of writing policy papers late at night. It paints such a vivid picture of incredible fortitude, real belief. But despite all that, that relentless pushing, eventually the tide did turn. The book points to a specific pivotal moment that really changed everything for India's IT sector, shifting it from those basement operations, those shared taxis, to the global powerhouse we see today. What exactly was that turning point, and what were its immediate, almost electrifying consequences for this industry Nasscom had so painstakingly built?
Yeah, this is where we see all that meticulous groundwork laid by Nasscom collide, in a good way, with a truly seismic shift in the economy. The single critical inflection point that just transformed the entire landscape for India's IT sector was the 1991 economic reforms.
Oh,
See, for decades before that, India had operated under this highly protectionist, centrally planned economic system. People called it the license Raj.
right. I've heard that term. Very restrictive.
Extremely. Characterized by stifling regulations, complex bureaucracy, a deep distrust of foreign investment and trade. The reforms that started in '91, largely triggered by a balance of payments crisis, fundamentally opened up India's economy, opened it to global trade, to investment, dismantling many of those restrictive policies, fostering unprecedented liberalization.
A complete turnaround.
It really was not just a minor tweak, a fundamental change in India's economic philosophy. And this provided the absolute perfect environment for the foundation Nasscom had already so carefully laid over more than a decade. All those years of unpaid work, the relentless advocacy, the policy papers, the relationship building with a hesitant government, suddenly it paid off exponentially. The gates opened, the world was suddenly ready to look at India differently, and India was finally ready to engage properly with the global economy.
The timing was perfect.
Incredible timing. It really highlights that synergy between sustained grassroots effort and big top-down policy changes. Without Nasscom's decade of prep work, advocating for IT policy, those reforms might not have boosted the IT sector nearly as much. But conversely, without the reforms, Nasscom's efforts might have stayed kind of academic, unable to translate into real growth. They met at the perfect, critical moment.
So what happened immediately after '91? What did that explosion look like?
Immediately after these reforms, there was just an explosion of growth and global recognition. It was breathtaking, really, in its speed and scale. Software exports from India didn't just creep up, they literally exploded and moved rapidly beyond just basic data entry or simple coding. This wasn't luck. It was the direct result, the visible result of all those deliberate strategic efforts finally hitting critical mass in this newly liberalized, globally connected environment. Global companies, the ones who'd previously dismissed India or just saw it as cheap labor, finally started to take serious, undeniable notice. They saw India's growing, sophisticated IT capabilities.
The perception finally shifted.
Massively. Indian engineers, once kind of fragmented, gained significant global respect for their skills, their professionalism, their ability to solve complex problems. The view truly shifted from cheap labor to respected talent and even strategic partner. That's a profound transformation. It impacted countless careers, boosted national pride hugely, and fundamentally changed how India saw its place in the world. The book really captures this explosion of activity, of opportunity. It details how quickly trust in Indian IT started to rise dramatically, leading to bigger deals, multi-year contracts, global partnerships. Especially as the Y2K crisis approached, that really demonstrated India's ability to handle large-scale complex projects under pressure.
Right, Y2K was a huge opportunity.
A massive catalyst. And if we connect this to the big picture, the legacy is undeniable in today's landscape, the enduring legacy of the Mavericks. Today, India's IT sector is this colossal global force, valued at well over $200 billion a year. It directly employs over 5 million people in skilled jobs. Countless startups are thriving, innovating in every major city, Bengaluru, Mumbai, Delhi, across all sorts of areas, fintech, AI, you name it. Technology is arguably the single biggest force shaping India's future now, driving the economy, creating opportunities, cementing India's position as a global digital leader.
Staggering.
It is. And what's crucial to get from the book is that none of this happened by accident. It wasn't some organic, mystical evolution. This current reality is a direct consequence, a meticulously designed outcome of the visionary, tireless work detailed in the Maverick Effect. It wasn't accidental. It was a future painstakingly crafted, built by the Mavericks. One policy paper, one tough meeting, one act of collaboration at a time. And that's the ultimate so what for you, the listener. How a small group's audacious vision and sheer grit transformed a nation, creating not just a sector, but a global economic powerhouse.
What an absolutely incredible trajectory. From those early, almost desperate struggles, fighting fear and indifference, to this multi-billion-dollar industry that truly defines so much of modern India. This story is clearly way more than just tech history, isn't it? It feels like a profound blueprint, a real masterclass in how you actually engineer significant, lasting change, whether you're trying to shift an industry, a company, maybe even just a mindset in your community. So, what are the core actionable lessons that the Maverick Effect really offers? What can you, our listener, genuinely take away from this chronicle of nation building, maybe apply it to challenges in your own world?
The lessons embedded in the Maverick Effect are definitely universal, incredibly potent. They resonate far beyond just the tech world. First and foremost, I think the book is a definitive guide on how to build a movement from scratch. It gives this practical, real-world example of how you initiate and sustain a major transformative movement even when you have no existing structures, no precedents to follow, and virtually no money.
The zero resources part again?
Exactly.
Yeah.
It fundamentally emphasizes the power of having a crystal clear vision, an almost unwavering commitment, bordering on obsession, really, and that almost magical ability to mobilize different people around a common, compelling goal, even when resources are painfully thin. It's a testament to that powerful idea that truly grand achievements often start with incredibly humble, persistent, often unrecognized beginnings. It shows that the initial spark of belief, the sheer force of will, can be far more powerful, more catalytic than any amount of initial funding. It's about being incredibly resourceful when you have nothing.
Okay, so vision and commitment trump resources initially. What else?
A central, and maybe like we said, counterintuitive theme throughout the book is the absolute importance of collaboration over competition. The book powerfully demonstrates why it's so necessary to unify diverse, often rival groups under one shared mission, especially those fragile early stages. Harish Mehta's own words, which really become a mantra in the book, "We were not here to compete, we were here to build together," perfectly capture this.
Challenging standard business thinking.
Totally. It directly challenges that conventional wisdom that often puts fierce, cutthroat competition on a pedestal as the only driver of success. Instead, Mehta's account shows that in those formative stages, collective strength, mutual support, focusing together on growing the whole pie, that can yield far greater, more sustainable results than everyone just fighting for their own little slice. He had to convince his rivals that if they didn't hang together, the whole fledgling industry would just collapse. It's about understanding that a rising tide lifts all boats. But first, you actually have to build the ocean together.
Build the ocean. I like that metaphor. And what about the long term?
The book also vividly illustrates what it truly takes to create deep, long-term change and cultivate ethical leadership. This isn't a story about quick wins or quarterly results. It's about deep, systemic, enduring transformation of a whole sector, impacting millions of lives for generations to come. And it profoundly emphasizes the absolutely essential role of ethical leadership throughout that whole tough process. The book details the inevitable tensions, the internal politics within Nasscom, the relentless external pressures, but it consistently highlights the foundational principles, the unwavering ethical framework that held the Mavericks together despite their differences.
So ethics wasn't just a side issue.
Not at all. Ethical leadership builds trust, not just among the core team, but with a skeptical government, with global clients looking for reliability, with the public they needed to inspire. That trust is an invaluable, intangible asset for reputation, for sustained growth, for ensuring the change you create is not just big, but also resilient, fair, and truly foundational. It shows integrity isn't just nice to have, it's a core, strategic part of building anything that lasts.
Right. Trust is a strategic asset. That's key. Any final big lesson?
Yes, and perhaps the most profound one. The Maverick Effect encourages a mindset shift towards nation building versus pure business. This book really expands the scope of what entrepreneurial ambition can be, far beyond just making profits or building a successful company. It profoundly suggests that true, transformative impact often comes from contributing directly to the broader societal and economic development of your country. One of the early Nasscom vision papers had this powerful quote, "India didn't win the IT race. We created our own track."
Created their own track.
Exactly. This isn't just about competing better on an existing field. It's about imagining and then designing an entirely new future, creating opportunities where none existed before, building the very infrastructure for a nation's progress and global standing. This is why the book is often called a masterclass in legacy. It's about building something so fundamental, so impactful, that it far outlasts any one person, any single company. Creating an enduring foundation for future generations and literally reshaping a nation's destiny.
Wow. A masterclass in legacy. That really sums it up. What a profound and genuinely actionable set of lessons. It truly is more than just history, it's a living blueprint. And you mentioned the way Harish Mehta tells the story is also a key part of its power. It's clearly not some dry academic text, right? Full of abstract theories. It sounds much more personal, almost like having a conversation.
Absolutely, and that's one of his greatest strengths. The Maverick Effect really stands out because of its writing style.
Hmm.
Simple, honest, and deeply personal. Harish Mehta doesn't write like a detached historian or, a CEO presenting a polished report. He writes like a trusted friend sharing this incredible, raw insider story. There's almost no jargon, which makes it incredibly accessible and engaging even if you're not deep in the tech world.
That helps a lot.
It really does. Instead, it's packed with vivid, real-life details. You read actual bits from emails that shaped huge decisions. You feel the tension and drama of difficult boardroom meetings. You experience the exact moments, those pivotal turning points that shifted everything. And each chapter, instead of ending with a sort of self-congratulatory summary, ends with genuine reflection, often asking questions that make you think, that really boosts its authenticity, makes the whole story feel very humble.
Like you're in the room.
Exactly. As a reader, you genuinely feel like you were sitting at the table when history was made, experiencing the wins, the frustrations, the moments of despair right alongside the Mavericks. That personal, intimate touch fosters a much deeper connection to the story and makes these complex historical events feel immediate, relatable, and just incredibly engaging.
So who should pick this up? Who is the ideal reader?
Its appeal is incredibly broad. It goes way beyond just tech enthusiasts. It's essential reading, I think, for entrepreneurs, especially those starting out with limited resources or trying to shake up an established system. It's a true masterclass in building a movement from the ground up and making an impact against the odds. It's incredibly valuable for tech students and professionals who want to understand the real story behind one of the world's biggest IT industries. Policy thinkers, government folks, they'll find it a fascinating case study on how you can foster industry growth through collaboration, how you leverage private sector vision for national development.
Business historians, too, I bet.
Oh, definitely. Business historians will appreciate the detailed, first-hand account of this monumental economic shift. And honestly, anyone who just loves underdog stories, narratives about perseverance, audacious vision, collective success against overwhelming, almost impossible odds, they'll find it profoundly inspiring and really rewarding. More specifically, for every Indian, it offers this vital, illuminating understanding of how real transformative change actually begins, how the current tech landscape that shapes so much of modern India was painstakingly built, brick by brick, against all expectations. It's a guide, it's a compelling story, and it's a powerful blueprint for mission-driven entrepreneurship that you just don't find in a standard business textbook.
What an incredible journey we've taken today, seriously. From a nation that, as you said, once actively feared computers, to a global IT superpower. The Maverick Effect isn't just history, it's a living, breathing testament to the profound power of vision, collaboration, and just relentless determination. We've seen how a few individuals operating with, I love this phrase, maximum intent and zero resources, literally designed and then built a new future for their entire country, created a whole vibrant industry from what seemed like thin air. This deep dive, drawing straight from Harish Mehta's personal and really profound account, it truly shows us that even the most monumental, world-changing transformations often begin with the quiet courage of just a few people, a willingness to build together even with your rivals, and an unwavering, almost audacious belief in an improbable future. It's about understanding that you don't always have to win on someone else's track. Sometimes the truly revolutionary act is to create your very own.
Absolutely. And this deep dive into the Maverick Effect really does raise an important question, I think, for all of us listening. In a world where challenges often seem insurmountable, where bureaucracy or lack of resources can feel just paralyzing, what untapped Maverick Effect might be waiting to be unleashed in your own community, perhaps, your own industry, even within your own organization. Consider the profound power of that unity, that shared audacious vision, just like we saw in India's IT revolution. How might a similar collaborative spirit, if we applied it to today's huge challenges, climate change, healthcare, social equity, whatever it might be, how might that create the next unforeseen revolution? The powerful story of India's IT revolution really suggests that the most impactful, the most enduring changes, they're rarely just imposed from the top down. They are meticulously built from the ground up by those people bold enough to believe in the impossible and then work together persistently, patiently to make it happen. So if you're inspired to learn more about this incredible transformation, about how you literally design an entire future, we highly recommend diving into the Maverick Effect yourself. It's truly an indispensable guide for anyone aspiring to build something that genuinely